Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Killer Paper Cut by Joanna Campbell Slan, narrated by Amy Mcfadden. 1. A Friday evening, 10 days before Halloween, the old social hall, St. Louis, Missouri. Blood spurted all over my hands and plopped onto my keds. I've seen some pretty clumsy crafters in my day, but Mary Martha Delaney took the cake and iced it, too. She had managed to cut through the paper, her mat, the table, and her palm, and we were only 5 minutes into our project. Worse yet, the silly thing watched the blood run down her arm before smearing it on her blouse. At first glance, Mary Martha looked like a kindergartner covered in poster paint. There was red stuff on her sleeve, wiped across her bosoms, and dripping on her white stretch pants. Did I mention the sight of blood makes me woozy? It does, especially now that I'm 7 months pregnant. But I was the CICC, or crafter in charge of the crop being the accepted term for a scrapbooking party. My name's Kiki Lowenstein, and I'm a scrapbooker. I was also hostess of this little soiree because I own Time in a Bottle, the scrapbook and craft store that sponsored this event, a fundraiser that we'd named the Halloween Crafting Spooktacular. In my private life, I'm the mother of Anya, who is 13 going on 30, and 5-year-old Eric. Rounding out our household is my sweetheart and the father of my baby, Detective Chad Detweiler, and Bronwyn Mcfadden, otherwise known as Brawny, our live-in nanny. Yep, a lot of people depend on me. I'd promised my family that I could handle this crop, even though I was so tired that passing out sounded sort of heavenly, like a brief unscheduled nap. But I couldn't relinquish my responsibilities that easily. Nope, I'm too much of a trooper. While I struggled to keep from fainting, Mary Martha's friend Dolores Peabody reached over and pressed a tissue into Mary Martha's cut. That proved largely ineffective. In fact, it increased the flow. Now Dolores sported a bright red smear of blood across the front of her t-shirt. Mary Martha turned and managed to wipe blood on me, explaining, "Your belly was in the way." The sour look she cast at my tummy told me that she knew I wasn't married. I'd run into that response before, so I wasn't unprepared. Irked? Yes, but not totally taken off guard. Maybe this will help. Patricia Wojcinski was another friend of Mary Martha's. Patricia pressed her cotton hanky into Mary Martha's hand, but Patricia underestimated the amount of blood we were dealing with. Soon she too was wiping blood all over her own clothes. Time to pull up my big girl maternity panties and take control. Mary Martha, we need to get you to the emergency room. I reached down to put steady pressure on the wound. My free hand cupped her elbow and urged her to stand. This produced no result, because Mary Martha was big enough to be both a Mary and a Martha. Heavens, no! Thank the good Lord it's just a scratch. I'll offer it up to Jesus. Something told me he'd rather have flowers on the altar, but who am I to judge? Gee, I don't know. This is bleeding pretty good. The smell of copper in the air encouraged me to heave. Pretty well, said Clancy from her spot 10 feet away. Nothing made her madder than misuse of English grammar. Clancy was conducting this portion of our event. Although she's new to crafting, she's learning fast. Pretty well, I repeated after my friend. Clancy, we've got a problem here. Good luck, she said, without turning a hair of her perfectly shaped auburn bob. Let's continue with our project. The next step is to rub your chalk applicator across the brown chalk and use it to edge your pumpkin. Edge their pumpkins my left foot. Clancy was purposely ignoring my crisis. Given a taste of teaching card-making, Clancy had become quite the expert. She loved seeing novice stampers turn out brilliant results. I have to admit that I'm impressed by her newfound ability. Funny how when a person finds her crafting niche, she can really shine, and that's exactly what Clancy has done. "Laurel, can you help Kiki?" Clancy called out to our other co-worker. "I'm on it." Laurel Wilkins trotted over. In one hand was the first aid kit we brought to every crop, but she was stopped in her progress because of all the junk Mary Martha and friends had spread all over the floor. "I think Kiki is making this worse," said Mary Martha. Nice. Really nice. I fought the urge to give Mary Martha a kick in the shins. Suffice it to say, I haven't been in a good mood lately. "Oh, my," said Laurel. "Does it hurt much, Mary Martha? Are you okay? You poor baby. How about if we go to the ladies' room and see how much of this we can get wiped off? Then I'll dress the wound." "It's God's plan that you'd be here to help, Laurel," said Mary Martha. "Kiki, could you help her get over to me? I'll take it from there," said Laurel, tossing that fabulous mane of blonde hair out of her face. As usual, she looked as if she'd just stepped from the pages of a Boston Proper catalog. I, on the other hand, looked as if I'd swallowed a beach ball and forgotten to burp. "I could do this. I've done harder things." Taking Mary Martha's elbow, I walked her around the end of the table and pointed her toward Laurel. My stomach heaved as I stood in the middle of a room full of crafters, soaked in Mary Martha's blood, surrounded by bloody pieces of facial tissue. Why, oh why, had I agreed to hold an off-site crop? Was it because the idea of helping people with diabetes had proved irresistible? Or because I was a fool? 2. It seemed like a good idea at the time. If I wasn't so squeamish about getting a tattoo, I'd have that phrase inked to my upper thigh. When our friend Laurel Wilkins asked that we help her with a charity crop to raise money for the Diabetes Research Foundation, I said, "Sure, easy peasy, we are crops." I underestimated the amount of blood, sweat, and tears necessary to pull off a really stunning, over-the-top, mega-successful event. Actually, 2 events worthy of its title: the Halloween Crafting Spooktacular, to be held on 2 consecutive nights before the actual holiday. So, sue me. When I bought Time in a Bottle, I thought I had a pretty good understanding of what the store's founder, Dodie Goldfodder, did to make everything hunky-dory. Boy, was I ever wrong. There were tons of behind-the-scenes details that I never expected. Instead of a learning curve, I was climbing Mount Everest without benefit of a Sherpa, in a snowstorm, while pregnant, in high heels. Sigh. In order for any off-site crop to be successful, there were a myriad moving parts that had to be coaxed into alignment. Since this crop was a fundraiser, every tiny detail had to be considered carefully so that we didn't waste a cent of the money coming in. The event had to make a splash, or people wouldn't shell out their hard-earned coins to come. The party had to appeal to scrapbookers, card makers, and paper crafters of all ilk. The make-and-take portion, the actual crafts we'd be teaching our guests, had to be unique, simple to do, but cool enough that they wouldn't bore our regular store clientele to tears. The entertainment had to be exceptional, and the location had to offer a high wow factor. And last, but definitely not least, we had to have food. Really, really good food. After considering all our options, I had concluded that there was really only one place worthy of such a big Halloween event: the Lemp Mansion on DeMinnel Place. The mansion has a history of misery second to none. In 1876, beer baron William J. Lemp and his wife Julia moved in, turning the 33-room house into a showplace. Lemp also decided to use his home as his office, taking advantage of a tunnel extending from the house to the caves under St. Louis. These naturally occurring storage shelters provided the refrigeration so vitally important to the brewing process. Thanks to a series of shrewd business decisions made by William, the Falstaff brand expanded from a local brew to a label enjoyed around the world. Although the Lemps were thriving financially, unbeknownst to William and Julia, their fourth son, Frederick, had significant health problems. When Frederick died from complications, William shot himself in despair. William J. Lemp, Jr., Billy, took over the family business. He and his wife Lillian, nicknamed the Lavender Lady, moved into the Lemp mansion. An acrimonious divorce followed. Billy was granted only visitation rights to see his son, William III. 2 years later, Prohibition dealt a harsh blow to the business, and Billy was forced to sell first the trademark name and then the brewery. Meanwhile, after suffering her own marital problems, Billy's sister shot herself. 2 years later, Billy shot himself in his office in the mansion. And 2 decades later, the last Lemp to live in the mansion, Charles, shot first his dog and then himself in the head. In 1980, Life magazine named the Lemp Mansion one of the 9 most haunted houses in the country. Supposedly, the Lavender Lady walks the halls at night. Both the Discovery and the Travel Channel have given the Lemp Mansion a nod for being terrifying. Since I'm such a Chicken Little, I decided that we'd tour the Lemp Mansion while it was still daylight, walk 1 block over to the old social hall, where we'd have our crop. While we worked on our projects and ate, we'd have an actress, Faye Adora, entertain us with ghost stories. Faye billed herself as a historical reenactor, so I hired her to put on a one-woman show, complete with visuals that would give my attendees a reason to whip out their cameras and take copious photos. Faye had proposed dressing as the Lavender Lady herself. As a way of memorializing the tragedies that had occurred in the Lemp Mansion, Faye would wear ripped and bloodied clothes in shades of purple. While our guests worked on their projects, she would stroll around the room, offering to stop and pose so our guests could have their pictures taken with her as Lillian Lemp. Once I had the big entertainment, the Lemp Mansion, the ongoing entertainment, Faye Adora, and the actual crop location, the old social hall, taken care of, I moved on to procuring our food. You can't have a crop without food. It's simply not done. Although my friend Cara Mia Delgado had moved to Florida, I still relied on her family restaurant for most of our catering needs. A young woman named Angela Orsini had recently been promoted to the post of catering manager. Angela and I had worked up a fun menu for the charity crop. The old social hall had a kitchen, so we were good to go. There were 2 large meeting rooms. I figured that we would crop in room A and then adjourn to room B to eat. That would keep food and drink away from paper products, preventing the predictable disasters caused by spillage. When all those moving parts were in place, I turned my attention to our raison d'être. In high school French class, I learned that meant reason for existence, the crafting portions of our crop. Time in a Bottle is famous for having the coolest make-and-take events in town. Not only are our projects creative, we also strive to teach crafters a new skill. Yes, we've set the bar high, and pregnant or not, it's my job to keep jumping over it. Except that right now, thanks to the fact I was wearing Mary Martha's blood all over me, I wasn't jumping. I was gathering bloody tissues and tossing them into the trash. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to puke or faint, or both. I settled on heading for the bathroom so I could be prepared for either possibility. As I started through the doorway, who should pass me but Mary Martha? While I'd turned pea green, she looked positively radiant. 3. After being sick as a dog, I splashed my face with cold water, rinsed my mouth, and struggled to wipe blood off my maternity top. That proved futile, but it did help dilute the smell. Even though my lovely blouse was soaked through, I felt a lot better. I headed out of the bathroom, planning to find a quiet spot where I could sit down for a minute while my head cleared and my tummy settled. The only empty chair was over by Mary Martha and friends. "The food will be ready when you are. Is this what you expected, crowd-wise?" asked Angela, after I'd plopped down gracelessly into the chair. "With this much activity? Usually we plan for 10% of the people not to show up, but every place here is filled." What had started as a modest idea to happen on one night only quickly became an overnight sensation. The media loved the irony. Here we were pairing a candy-centric holiday with a diabetes research fundraiser. Almost as soon as we sent out our email newsletter, I began fielding calls from the media. 2 days after we announced the event, we had sold out all our seating at our Halloween crafting spooktacular and had 2/3 as many names on a waiting list. It wasn't just the media exposure that brought people in. Father Joe Riley was a friend of Laurel's and a former student of Clancy's. The young Episcopal priest had given our event his wholehearted endorsement from the pulpit. "There are those who think celebrating Halloween is wrong," he told his audience, "but that totally depends on your intent. Is it to glorify death? Then it's wrong. Is it to appreciate life and honor the memories of the departed? That's worthy. And I can think of no effort more worthy than to support research into the cure of diabetes." Once word got around that Father Joe endorsed our crop, the waiting list had grown dramatically. Since the crop was for an important cause, I called Angela and asked if there was any way we could schedule a second event for the following night. "We'll make it happen. My stepson has diabetes, so I'm totally on board," she said. After she said yes, the other pieces fell into place. Here I was, fresh from hosing myself down in the bathroom, staring at 35 women and their scrapbook supplies. Make that 34. Mary Martha was still being coddled by Laurel. I glanced at the accident-prone crafter and tried not to let the sight of her blood really register on my senses. "Oh, no," said Mary Martha. "I don't know how I'll ever finish my Halloween card." "I can help you," Laurel said, glancing around for a place to sit. "There's an extra chair right here," said Dolores. "Or there was. Kiki took it." I can take a hint? For whatever reason, these ladies were not interested in my company. I stood up and whispered in Laurel's ear, "Keep an eye on Mary Martha. She's the most accident-prone crafter I've ever met." I wobbled my way to the front of the room where Clancy was prepping for the next make-and-take session. When I couldn't find a chair, I sank down gratefully on the 4-wheeled cart we'd used to haul supplies into the building. The crafters all worked on their projects for another 20 minutes without incident. Clancy kept an eye on her watch and the door. A young man in black slacks and a white shirt stepped into the room and rang a small copper bell. "Dinner is served." Laurel helped Mary Martha step over the mess she'd made. I heard the injured crafter say to Laurel, "You will sit next to us, won't you? I want you to see the pictures I took inside the Lemp mansion." "I'd be delighted," said my co-worker. What a study in contrasts they made. Laurel has an enviable figure, and she dresses with a hint of sexuality. Mary Martha, on the other hand, was wearing a bloody t-shirt paired with sweatpants. While Laurel is always perfectly groomed, Mary Martha needed to take a trip through a car wash in a convertible with the top down. I told myself that I was being needlessly judgmental and unkind. And I was. But I was also really, really tired. Just a few nights ago, we'd had a Halloween party in Illinois at the farm owned by my sweetie, Detective Chad Detweiler's parents. It had been a wonderful evening, but all the festivities had taken a lot out of me. Detweiler's parents and I were getting to know each other, but with a baby on the way, we did a lot of dancing around each other emotionally. I was drained from my visit. After our guests took their seats in Room B, the room reserved for eating, Angela's catering staff served ghoulish treats, spooky punch with frozen eyeballs, and appetizers with spiders on them. This was prime time for me and my co-workers to circulate with coupons designed to bring the crafters back to time in a bottle. While I passed out my coupons, Laurel hovered over the hapless crafter and her friends, making them feel welcome. Faye Adora also made the rounds, stopping long enough for our croppers to have their pictures taken with the lavender lady. Mary Martha and friends asked Laurel to snap their photos. I stayed as far away from Faye as possible, because the fake blood smeared all over her looked all too real for me. Our crafters were absolutely thrilled at the chance to pose next to Faye in all her ghoulish gore. A couple of them even dipped their hands into her vat of fake blood. Angela's dinner was well received. Guests had their choice of mini barbecued chicken sandwiches or Asian lettuce wraps with spicy sweet potato fries. For vegetarians, there were boca burgers. Many croppers brought a favorite dish to share. The assortment of casseroles, salads, and veggies was astonishing. People ate and ate and ate, a sure sign of a good time. In between mouthfuls, they talked about what they'd seen at the Lemp mansion. That, too, had been a big hit. The waitstaff bustled about clearing dishes. A few of the women lingered over coffee and tea, but most had headed to Room A, where their crafting supplies were. "Be right back," said Laurel as she walked toward the ladies' room, carrying her purse. "Remember, we'll be coming back to this room later for desserts and a presentation by the lavender lady. Now we'll move to Room A for our door prizes," said Clancy. It took a while to get everyone herded from one room to the other, but the promise of winning door prizes finally hurried people along. Clancy began drawing and calling out numbers we'd assigned to the crafters when they first arrived. The excitement grew as she called one number right after another. Since we were on a tight schedule, she made the announcements while I distributed the gifts to an endless stream of squealing crafters. I was handing Dolores Peabody a shopping bag done up with ribbons when I heard the scream. 4. At first, our crafters and I thought it was a prank. I knew it came from the restroom, but I didn't race toward the sound. Instead, I stood and went over to the hallway. "Call out the next number!" yelled a woman in the back. Clancy shrugged and said, "Probably a joke." 46678. "Woo!" yelled a cropper. "That's me!" But as our guest trotted to the front of Room B, a voice hollered, "Call 911. We need a cloth, something to staunch the blood." I took off as fast as my burgeoning belly would allow. "I'll call 911, yelled Clancy from behind me. Angela and I converged in the hallway. We hit the bathroom door together, throwing it open and rounding the corner. There we skidded to a halt. One of our longtime crafters, Bonnie Gossage, was on her knees, pressing her hand to the side of Laurel's neck. With each pump of the girl's heart, a little blood spurted between the attorney's fingers. Another spot between Laurel's ribs was also leaking blood. More blood was flowing from her forearm. "Angela," I said, "tell a server to stand outside with a white tablecloth. Clancy's already called 911. "Will do," said the caterer. I dropped to my knees, offering Bonnie my help. "What happened?" I asked. "Laurel was like this when I walked in," said Bonnie. She's an attorney by trade, a fine one, and I doubt she ever gets very rattled, but this had her quivering in shock. Me too. "I'll clamp my hands over yours," I said. That gave us a better purchase on Laurel's throat. However, Laurel started sliding along the tile. At the rate she was moving, she'd soon slip away from us. "I'll keep my hands on the cut. You prop her up so she can breathe," Bonnie said. She was right. Laurel's airway would fill with blood, and she might drown if we didn't get her into a different position. Unfortunately, I would have to reach over my belly and twist to lift Laurel. Moving her wouldn't be easy. "On the count of 3, I said. 1, 2, 3. My kneecaps ached as they pressed against the hard bathroom tiles. Blood squished between my fingers. The smell of Bonnie's strawberry-scented hair mingled with the coppery tang of blood. If I'm ever asked to do a life review, those minutes will surely count as the longest of my life. Amazing how many prayers you can cram into such a short space of time. Either God was listening, or we were lucky. Incredibly so. The emergency dispatcher located an ambulance around the corner from us. The emergency techs inside had just returned from a hospital run. The bus was empty. The next few minutes were a blur. Later, I'd realized that I'd gone into shock, but I didn't understand that at the time. Everything seemed to slow down, and I could only remember bits and pieces. I can't say exactly how they managed to pry our fingers off or to get the IV started on Laurel, but they did. I don't remember what we told our waiting crafters. I believe Clancy announced there'd been an accident. Sirens drowned out a lot of her words. I remember that my teeth started chattering. Clancy noticed and said something, although I can't recall what. Uniformed first responders showed up on the heels of the EMTs. They cordoned off the bathroom, radios crackled, the uniformed police called in detectives and reinforcements. My hands started shaking. I opened my cell phone. Anyone with a police scanner would soon know there'd been a stabbing at a scrapbook crop in the old social hall. I could think of at least one person who'd be terrified. I called my own law enforcement officer, Detective Chad Detweiler. 5. The same time as the crop, a coffee shop in Webster Groves, Missouri.
"I can't tell her,"
said Leighton Haversham as he stirred his decaf mocha latte.
"Kiki's like a daughter to me, and since she's pregnant, I just can't bring myself to do it."
Detective Chad Detweiler resisted the urge to jump up, grab Leighton, and shake him, hard. If the older man didn't look so miserable, he might have. But Leighton couldn't meet Detweiler's eyes. He kept stirring that same cup of light brown liquid without actually drinking a drop of it. By now, Leighton's latte was probably lukewarm. Detweiler had long since downed 2 cups of black coffee without any cream or milk.
"I'll tell her,"
said Detweiler at long last.
"Kiki's going to hate me. She won't be happy."
Leighton sighed.
"I'm sure you'd like to wring my neck."
Coward, thought Detweiler. Leighton had asked to meet in a public place because he was scared that Detweiler would throw a punch at him. Well, he was right. Detweiler couldn't believe what the man was asking of them. How could he do this to Kiki? As if reading Detweiler's mind, Leighton mumbled,
"I wouldn't do this except that Melissa and I haven't spoken for years. It's all my fault. I wasn't a good father. I let her down. When her mother and I split—"
And then he stopped.
"Well, that's just an excuse, I guess. I wasn't there for the girl, and she's never asked anything of me, so I can't very well tell her no, can I? Not when she's begging me for a place to live, a place of her own, so she can start over."
Detweiler could see his point, but then he imagined the look on Kiki's face when he told her they'd have to move out of the tiny cottage in Webster Groves, and suddenly he didn't feel so forgiving of Leighton. He jammed his fists in his jacket pocket so he didn't give in to the urge to slug him. With a jolt, Detweiler realized how upset he was, and it surprised him. Usually he took a live-and-let-live attitude. He understood that people did the best they could. Sometimes they made good choices, other times not so much. Everyone was trying his or her best to get by. His mother had taught him compassion, explaining that others had their own problems. His father had taught him patience, reminding Detweiler to respect the rhythms of other people. So he was trying to empathize with Leighton. Really, he was. But somehow he just couldn't. Watching Kiki's belly grow had changed everything for him. It had kindled a sense of terror. All of his protective instincts were on high alert. It was up to him to make sure that she and their child was safe. His feelings only intensified as he watched Kiki make dozens of small sacrifices every day. She struggled with morning sickness, dry skin, and heartburn. She'd given up all artificial sweeteners, which meant taking a pass on her beloved Diet Dr. Pepper. Of course, she didn't drink alcohol.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?